mics, okay. It's a small enough room, so hopefully everyone will hear. I'm Judith Hallerstein. This is Shiloh Healy, Glenn McKnight, and I'm also standing in for Sarah Hayden, who had some plane trouble, and she was really sad that she's only going to be here tonight. She's been traveling for like 36 hours because her first plane had technical difficulties, and so she was really sorry she can't be here. But she gave me her notes, and I will give her talk for her. So this session is about the Global Indigenous Ambassador Program that At Large, which is one of the constituencies within ICANN, is giving. At Large represents the interests of end users in ICANN and individual users. And we have different, we're set up to have regional, what are called RALOs, regional at-large organizations. We have 5 of them. We have in North America, and in Latin America, and the Caribbean, in Europeans, Asia Pacific, Africans, and so we work on behalf of the 3.2 million internet users, 3.2 billion, and you're going to say, well, how is it impossible to speak for all of them? Each of the regional groups has different chapters, which we call ALSs, at-large structures, that make up of them, and those chapters then represent other groups. So there's 220 of these around the world, and they represent others. But it is also why it's so important to get diversity of opinions and bring new voices into ICANN, so that we really can represent everyone, not just the technology people, but also underrepresented groups. And the Indigenous are one of the main ones that are often unrepresented. And Glenn McKnight is also going to be talking a little bit about what were the impetuses and drives of setting up this program, and then a little bit about the program, some of the cultural issues, some of the other issues. Shiloh is one of our Indigenous ambassadors. She was at our most recent one in Puerto Rico. We had a couple others. We had ambassadors in Hyderabad, in Abu Dhabi, and in Puerto Rico. Sarah, who I'm also speaking for, was on the evaluation team, and she did a heroic job of oftentimes reading through 200 applications just to make a shorter cut so that our entire evaluation team could actually evaluate a set of 10 and picking 2. And we originally conceived the program to have one of our mentors, because mentorship is such an important part of the program. Without a seasoned mentor, someone who really knows about the organization and can really help guide the new person through ICANN, which is a very large acronym-infested place. It's very confusing, so that's why you need a seasoned mentor to really sort of help guide them through before the meeting, what working groups are interesting, what ones they can get involved in, and that's why we place such a high importance on having a mentor. But I would start off with Glenn, who's gonna lead off.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to give you a little bit of history on why we created this program in the first place and the challenges we have. And many of you in your own organizations may have not considered our approach, but it might be worth looking at our best practice, and we're happy to share how we did it. So historically, over a 10-year period, ICANN had a fellowship program, and they have roughly 1,000 people. And the main focus of the fellows that actually entered into the program came from countries they deemed that, according to the UN mandates, least developed or least income, lowest GDP. So what happened was, in North America in particular, we cannot speak for Australia or Europe, but we looked at the situation that people in North America, people of poverty, rural Americans and Canadians, far north, and particularly of special interest for us in our group was the First Nations. So we advocated to ICANN saying, okay, you need to open up your fellowship program. And they basically were very, unfortunately no ICANN people are here, but they could verify our perspective. But as volunteers, we said, expand the program and let's focus on the most disadvantaged groups in North America. Let's look at the First Nations. So it took us, Judith, myself, and others, it took at least 3-4 years for them to finally listen to us. And so what they went through an actual wholesale revision of their program, and they opened up the fellowship program to North Americans, and that was their first step. And again, you're going to find that that was not our approach. We wanted the fellowship program that actually worked with organizations, individuals in the First Nations community, and say, hey, take advantage of this program. There's a lot of opportunity, and there was silence within the GAC program constituency in ICANN. There was no representation within the ALS structures, as Judith said. So the first step we did is we worked with a group called Native Public Media and other First Nations groups, and saying, okay, here's what Norello does. We are trying to expand particularly two groups that we were very interested in. One is the special needs, the disabled community, and the First Nations. And so we were able to bring some of these into the fold, into our membership. And I shared with you a card about Norello. And here's actually Speak of the Devil. Hey, Joe.
Hey.
Joe's with ICANN. So we worked very hard at working on getting them to change the perspective. So the first thing we did, as Judith can verify, is we asked for some funding for a few fellows for North America. And we had, for 2 years, the North American Indigenous Fellowship Program. So we had people from the community that come first, and one lady was from North Dakota. She was an IT director, and the other was from Hopi from Arizona. Excellent people. And then subsequent to the second year, we had Jeffrey and we had Matthew, and both superb individuals. In fact, Matthew spoke at the closing ceremony at the IGF in Geneva last year. So what we see is we've gone from having a program which had the North American Indigenous Fellowship Program finally recognized as a target group in terms of the stakeholder model, and and it has morphed into the Global Indigenous Program. Now, it is more than just North America because of the success of the program. The Sami in Finland, the Aborigines in Australia and elsewhere, and we had a program, and you were one of the ones selected in the first wave of the Global Indigenous Program, and it's become a core program, and I'm hoping that it will expand over time, that more and more people within the First Nations Indigenous community will apply to take advantage of the program. Now, I think and I won't jump into the benefits of the exchange of information, but we had real serious challenges. As I said, in each case, it was a fight all the way along. Because basically, if you're not there at the table, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows you have needs. So that was it. And Judith and I are not from the community, so we have no vested interest. So we were very concerned about pushing this agenda, and I think what we have is solid people who can carry the flag. We did our job. We want to be invisible. We want to be able to pass the torch on to other people to take responsibility. So, Judith, did I miss anything?
No, well, it was great. Thanks so much for laying down the ground rules. And as Glenn said, it's not easy to develop internet policy or internet governance issues for people without when they're not at the table. And so it's really important to involve them in every group. And so Sarah was leading our evaluation team. When we moved from North American to global, we decided we wanted to make sure that we had representatives from every single region, in at-large parlance, from every single regional at-large organization group. And so we reached out to each of these leaderships and said, can you appoint someone to be on our evaluation team? And Sarah, it was from the African team, and she really wanted to get involved in there. And when we originally, before we became global, we were called the Tribal Ambassador Program, which in Africa, every single African is part of a tribe. But they didn't understand the terminology that a tribe is not just that you're part of a tribe. It's basically, yes, you could be indigenous to this area, but are you working to help your tribe or your cohort, teaching them about internet, teaching them about governance, getting them involved on domain name issues, getting local content out to them? Are you doing that within your tribe? If you are, even though you're not quote unquote one of the indigenous groups, that is also a very underserved community, and you can be involved in the program. And explaining that to them really got forward, so that jumped up our applications, so that in our first program that Glenn mentioned, when we were in North America, we only had about 10 or 12 applications. The next year when we did it, we jumped to close to 40. And then after that, because of the success of the second program, we jumped to 200 applications. And we're all volunteers, and especially on the committee, none of us are indigenous. And so looking at an application and not sort of understanding what terms are there, what terms are we looking for, we sometimes miss some people who could have been great on the program, which is why we also wanted to have 5 different leaders on all the regions, so that they could argue for some program. Because I recall some of the indigenous in Pacific Islands were argued for to be put into the list by the coordinator from that region. In Latin America, some were argued to be put in because they didn't fill out the application that clearly, and so she went to talk to them and says, because she knows she was a teacher, are you this? Tell me what you're doing. And then found out, really? She really is from an indigenous. She didn't clearly state that and argued her case. And it's a lot of these cultural issues that people from different underserved regions are not as either knowledgeable of the English language or not knowledgeable of how to get this information across to some volunteers who are not indigenous and don't know keywords or buzzwords, don't know what things are. One of our issues is that one application person wrote Blood Indian. Well, is Blood Indian a tribe? Is it something? It's other terminology, and so that's some of the issues that in the problems on the evaluation. We also, when we first did it, as Glenn said, we did lessons learned. So the lessons learned were originally of how do we structure the application, how do we get some more information and learning about what is the person doing in their community. How do we get that information so that way we could judge, they're really making an impact in teaching their community. And so we changed the application process, the actual application, each time bettering it with the lessons learned from the other ones. We also, on our first program, we were not funded to, although we asked for funding for a mentor, we did not receive funding for a mentor. And then for the next one, we explained why after that a mentor is so, a funded mentor was so essential, and that we also preferred a mentor who had worked with Indigenous communities so that they could understand some of the cultural nuances that they might have and get a better, explain that the nuances better to the mentee, so that they could have more fulfillment of what is an ICANN meeting. Yes, you could join ICANN and be active outside of a meeting, but it's often very difficult because you don't experience it. So it's difficult to get to join, to become active without that. We also worked on the mentor application because we, having been working with other people, Glenn and I have been mentoring others, we also felt that a mentor needed someone who was very experienced, not just, someone who 1 or 2 years. We wanted someone with solid experience, and so we set about writing criteria that a mentor would have. And our first mentor was, who was also supposed to be on the panel, but she wasn't able to come, was Renata Aquino Ribeiro, who was working and mentoring a lot of different Indigenous groups and fighting on behalf of a lot of Indigenous people. And she was someone, a key mentor position is that work with your people beforehand, teach them, go through the sessions, and then afterwards keep working with your as guides to the programs going forward. And she was mentoring one from the Caribbean and one from Latin America, Ruben Hilare, who after the program set up his own chapter, ALS structure there, and has been working, teaching his local community. And set some of the guidelines of what it is and how to get forward through the process. We're all volunteers and devote our time to it. So there's not, it's a very, put in many hours to try to go through these applications. And we do it because we're also passionate about getting these people involved. And so, and I guess the questions, one of some questions that we would like to pose to others is, how do we get more voices to the table, and then how can we balance numbers for selecting issues that are important across the different regions, and some of these are other issues that we're going to be looking at. Just trying to go through Sarah's to make sure I hit all her points. She sent me her notes. Yeah, and also different groups of people have different needs and different way of doing things. So what maybe work good for some North Americans, tribal groups, may be a different thing for Africans or Asians. And in also many areas, there's also problems with women in teaching and getting access to computers and getting access to internet. And how do we overcome some of these issues? Not only that they have problems with women getting it, but also from an underserved community, so that adds on to that. So how do we reach these people and get these new voices? Because we want to make sure we hear all these voices. Down my thing. That is, yeah. And I think that's enough to go on, and I want to hear from, Shiloh was one of our most recent ambassadors, and this time around, in the 200 applications, we found 2 women really stood out from the whole all those applications of getting their passion and getting their interest on internet through their applications is a difficult process culturally. And so Shiloh was one, and Lillian is another one, and she's from the Wagyu tribe in Colombia, and she was working and teaching, and now she's going back and teaching the kids. She teaches she teaches children 10 and younger, and she's teaching them about internet and getting her passion across to them. But I'll let Shiloh go and give her a little talk.
I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional territory that we're in and thank them for having me. I guess I'll just kind of tell you what I do to find how I got connected with ICANN. I work for the Alberta First Nation Information Governance Center, and so it's a region based from a national organization with the same name, First Nation Information Governance Center. And how it started was pretty much Census Canada was collecting information on First Nations, but it wasn't regarding they weren't going on reserves to do the surveys. So they were basically just kind of rushing us over, so we decided to do our own survey. But of course, information gaps have been happening in the past. Data collection and questions that don't really apply to us have always been an issue. So what happened is we had the survey, but when we did the survey, we did a holistic survey and asked everything we could, because that's the first time we were going to get our own information by us. So we asked everything from what's the external environment like, what's your food security, the health stuff, all of those sorts of things. And while we were collecting data in First Nations communities, connectivity was a big thing because it was a computer-based survey. So we would have to go into communities, and then you would have to upload it when you got back to a city. And so this is kind of the gaps where we kind of started wanting to create relationships with any type of organization to find kind of, I guess, lessons learned from other underserved communities, and really kind of understand what's going on, because we've been left off the table on other economical things. So we wanted to be a part of the conversation. So